George Floyd, a name that wasn't known worldwide until after he died on Memorial Day. Award-winning podcast host Al Letson takes a look at Floyd's death and the protests against police brutality and racism in 350 cities and in all 50 states. It's in his new podcast, The Uprising, available on Reveal. Al, welcome to DC Today.
Hey, thanks for having me.
It's great to have you here. You know, your podcast, Uprising, is about having those tough, candid conversations that make a lot of folks uncomfortable. But being Black in America, I mean, pretty much we've heard it all. Was there something that you heard when interviewing your guests that even surprised you?
You know, I think most of the guests that we brought on really talked about, things that I was familiar with, but I loved going deeper into the topics. And also I talked to a young man he's about 18 years old, and hearing his viewpoint on it, I was just kind of amazed at how smart and well-read and thought out about all the things that were going on that this young man was. When I was 18, I grew up listening to Public Enemy, so I feel like I had a little bit of consciousness about me.
Mm-hmm.
But this kid, he has done the work and studied it. I studied Public Enemy, which was great, which was totally great. But this guy, he's read books and he understands all the race theory in a way that I didn't really get until I was in my 30s. So it was a pleasure to meet him.
And that's why I would encourage folks to listen to this podcast, because I know who you're referring to. As I was listening to him, I was shocked. I said, okay, this dude, he's probably in his 30s. And you asked him how old he was, and he said 19. I was shocked because, like you said, he's already doing the work and out there. And I believe he's out in Oakland. Is that right?
Yeah. He's in Oakland. He goes to school in New York City, but because of COVID, he's home.
Right. Okay. So speaking of Oakland, let's talk about your experiences covering protests in Berkeley and the San Francisco Bay Area, my old stomping grounds, as a matter of fact. So how many protests have you covered there?
I've only covered two. We didn't cover, we had, what they call in the business stringers. We had stringers covering the latest protests. But, a couple years ago, I covered 2 protests in Berkeley and then San Francisco. And it's just, it's just interesting to me how majority of these protests can be extremely peaceful. And people just kind of getting along and exercising their rights. And then there's a contingent of people who want to stir up trouble.
Right.
And maybe I don't think the people that I saw specifically looked at it as we're stirring up trouble, but the end result is that's what they did.
Exactly. Let's back up a little bit and talk about your background and how this podcast came to be. Was it because of the recent cases of police brutality that we have seen on videotape, or is this something that you've kind of been wanting to do all along?
Yeah, I think that, so with Reveal, we've been around for 5 years now. And we've always kept our eye on issues with policing in communities and police brutality. So for the whole 5 years we've been doing that. When George Floyd passed away and you saw an uprising happening across the country, I felt like there was no way we could not really focus on this issue and talk about it. But we've done a lot of work on policing and the issues with policing. It just kind of was right in line with the coverage that we're already doing. And, as an African-American man who grew up in the South, I'm quite familiar with the issues of policing in Black communities, but just in general. Mm-hmm. So it just felt like a really good time to talk about it. And it seems to be that there's change in the air. I'm hearing people talk about abolish police departments now, mm-hmm. Where before you only heard it in activist communities,
right,
with small groups of people who were talking about it. But now it feels like everyday people are beginning to use that language and think about it. And I think the idea that we are moving forward and rethinking all of this is encouraging.
Exactly. And it's not just about talking about, there are only a few bad apples within the departments, it's really looking at the root, meaning the entire department.
Absolutely.
And starting there instead of trying to weed out what people think are one or two.
Yep,
Is that
absolutely.
right?
When I first heard the term abolish the police departments like years ago, I remember being so skeptical because I was like, if you abolish the police departments, what does that mean?
Mm-hmm.
Then, like some activists sat down to school me, and what they're talking about is redoing law enforcement. That it's
Right.
not about getting rid of law enforcement. It's about realizing that we ask police to do way too much stuff, and we should break
Mm-hmm.
what they do and what they don't do.
I'll hold those thoughts because we want to talk more with you and delve more into your background when we come back. Everybody stay with us.